Imagine this. You are planning to explore a new city, and the tool we are going to build will give you a personalized recommendations, interactive maps that is color coded based on the local weather, then deep cultural insights, and an itinerary optimized to save your time there. It just tells you where to start your journey and where to end. We are going to build this travel assistant using OpenAI Assistants API. And this assistant is designed to make your journeys not just memorable, but also incredibly efficient. Let's get started. We will be writing a few functions in this project. Some of the functions are like product focused. For example, let's say you got some place name like Sydney and you get the geolocation, which could be like minus 73.77, 144.34, something like that. Then we will write one more function that takes place name or geolocation, and you will get a current weather if you pass today's date, or you can also get a weather forecast. For example, let's say you are visiting Kyoto next week, you will pass next week date, then you will get the next week forecast. So that's the second function. Then we will write one more function that takes city name, then a list of attractions. Let's say in Kyoto, you are visiting 10 places, you will get 10 place names. Then we will pass one more list that tells you how the weather looks like on some particular date, some weather information. Then based on these information, we will plot a map. If you see this map, you are seeing some names like places you are planning to visit, 10 places, and you will see a map. There is some color code. For example, blue means the weather is really good. Red means the weather is like rainy. If it's rainy, you will plan the trip accordingly. So that's the goal. And we will write three functions. We will get some output. Then we will focus more on OpenAI Assistants. In OpenAI Assistants, we will go through different components like chat completions, what is assistants, what are tools, how to define a tool, then what is threads, how we can add some messages to threads, and how we can use the thread and assistants together using a run. Then what's parallel function calling, how to do one, then how to use multiple assistants on a single thread. So that's the main goal of this project. Let's get started. So now I'm going to write some code for get coordinates for a city and attractions. Let's do that. What I'm going to do is these, if you go through the first three functions, place name to geolocation, place name or geolocation to current weather, creating city map. They're like some general functions. So I'm not going to do live coding on that, but we will do live coding and understand everything really well on OpenAI assistants like chat completions, assistants, tools, threads, messages, runs, parallel function calling, multiple assistants on a single thread. We will do live coding on that. But here I'm going to just copy paste some code and we will see how that looks like. So first, let's get coordinates for a city and an attractions. So let's use this code. So here we are passing place name and city name. Let's say place name, what's the attractions you want to visit, like Sydney. And you can, in the city name, you can use any attractions. Then you will get the coordinates of that place. We will test all these functions very soon, but let me just fill the next two functions. Now the second function is creating city map. So here, what we are doing is we are taking a city name, which could be Kyoto, then a list of attractions. It could be 10 different attractions. And we are having one more list that contains the weather information, like whether it's raining or not. You can also modify this code to include more information. Then we use OpenStreetMap from Plotly. Then let's run this. It will create a city map of London with 3 attractions. Then we are just plotting based on raining. If it's rainy, you will see a red dot. If it's not raining, you will see a blue dot. Let's run this. Okay. So we got a map. You are seeing three different attractions. And since London Eye, we defined going to rain there. So you are seeing red color. For rest, there is a blue dot. Okay. Looks good. Now let's create one more function that takes weather city information, then create a weather forecast for that city using Open Weather APIs. So for that, I'm going to use Open Weather API. So what we have to do is we can create a dot environment file. In that dot environment file, I have details for each API keys. For example, this is dot environment sample. You can say OpenAI with API key equal to some key. I'll show you how to get this key shortly. And for Open Weather API key, copy this, paste it here, and you use your key. I will also share details on how to find those keys. I have collected all my keys and put it on dot environment file. You have to do the same to make everything smoothly run. Okay, so let's run this. Now I'm going to write one more function. So this function, yes. Okay, so this function takes location, date, and few other information. Then it finds the weather information. For example, today's date, 2024, Jan 17th. So let's say you are forecasting tomorrow's date, Kyoto, and some city information. Sorry, you are forecasting Kyoto. So you are forecasting Kyoto on this date. This is the weather information. Okay, it looks good. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to create assistants. First, let's talk about what are assistants. Like we are going to use Assistants API. We will see what are the things we can do with Assistants API. So this Assistants API, we can pass some instructions. So this instructions is like a system message. We will see some samples during our live coding. For now, instructions means it's like a system message. It tells you what this assistant API going to do in this project. Then models. Currently, assistant API, it supports few models, GPT 3.5 Turbo 1106, then GPT 4 1106 preview. In future, they are also planning to support our own fine-tuned models. Okay. Then we also have tools, which means let's say you want to use a tool called Code Interpreter. So during my live coding, I will show you the difference between chat completion, what we can do with chat completion, and what we can do extra with Assistants API. For example, usually the chat completion models, we cannot write any code with that. Like we cannot execute code. But Assistant API, it has access to tools like Code Interpreter, and it has access to retrieval. For example, let's say you have got thousands of documents and you want to use these documents to get some answer. In that case, you can use retrieval. The assistant will automatically figure it out what tool to use. Then function calling. For example, weather information. For example, if you ask ChatGPT or large language models, what's the weather of Kyoto tomorrow? It won't get those information because those information are like predictive capabilities and it's not coded anywhere in their models. What we have to do is we have to use our own functions that take some input data and get some output similar to this one. Here we have weather information, get weather. You pass some location and some date, you get some output. Then this large language model takes those information and it uses those information in the models. So that's function calling. So we will see all these things in depth, but for now, just focus everything on high level. As I code each thing, I will teach you more. So this assistant API helps building AI assistants on our own applications. So this assistant API also has access to files. Currently, each assistant can have up to 20 files. Each file can be up to 512 MB and maximum of 2 million tokens. And for tools, at most you can have 128 tools. So this is Assistant API. So in Assistant API, what we do is we can have instructions, we can have more models like GPT-4, GPT 3.5, those details. Then it can have access to tools like code interpreter, retrieval, and function calling. Then it can have also access to files. Okay. Now we will do some coding. But before that, let me also talk more about function calling. So in function calling, this is going to be like a very short, quick intro on function calling. And later, as we code, I will teach you more about function calling. So in function calling, what's happening is, so in function calling, we define functions, then we convert functions to JSON. Then we pass JSON to the assistant, JSON details to assistants. Then our assistants, sometimes it will tell you, you have to call this function with these inputs. So assistants ask us to call assistants as to, it asks us to call a function, and it also gives us some input to pass to the function. So before creating an assistant, we are going to create some JSON structure. So that JSON structure is exactly the same as the functions, but in a different JSON format. Let's do that. Maybe before that, let me check a few other things. So let's say this is a place, and this is Kyoto, and we are going to get coordinates, and we are also get some weather information on some date like 18th. We just tested the first function, which is this one, get coordinates, and we tested the third function, which is get weather. You can see these are the coordinates details. And on this date, this is temperature, humidity, wind speed, and it says there is a light rain tomorrow. Okay. Sounds good. So now we are going to create a travel planner assistant. First of all, we will define some JSONs. To that, I'm going to copy paste and paste 3 different JSONs for 3 different functions. First one is get coordinate JSON. So this is a type of function, and in function we have few inputs like name, description, parameters, and in parameters we have type, properties, required. In function, the name is, we can use any name, but it will be nice if we use the same name as functions. So we know what function to call, get coordinates. Then you describe the function, because large language model, it understands what this function does. Then based on the descriptions and input parameters, it will create place name and city name automatically based on our input. So for that, we have to define 2 input, which is place name and city name. Both of this place name and city name are required. So that's why in required, you pass place name and city name. And this place name and city name arguments, we define what's the data type. Since this is JSON and not Python, we use something like string, not str or object or int or float. We use numbers and string. Then we define what the description of place name, the name of the specific place, then city name, the name of the city where the place is located. So you have some plain descriptions in JSON for the function we have written. So our large language model will learn something from here, and it knows we have a function called get coordinates, and it understands what this coordinates does by reading the descriptions and input data. Then based on that, it will populate what function to call with some input details. Let's run this. So let's create a few more of same. Create city map JSON. So in create city map JSON, we have a function which is name create city map, which is same as the function I defined at the top. Then description, we create a map with markers for specified attractions in a city. Then in parameters, we have properties like city name, attractions, is ready, and all the three information are required. So that's why in required we have a list with three different things. Okay. Now let's pass the last one, get weather JSON. Okay. So in get weather JSON, we have the same name as the input we defined, the function, then description of the function. Then in properties, we have a few details like location. Location could be sometimes an array, sometimes a city. So that's why there are two different things, one off. In type, let's say you are passing a city name, then the type is string, and the description is location name for which weather information is required. And the second one is array. You can use coordinate details. Let's say you cannot find some details using the city name, but you can find the weather information using latitude and longitude. Then you pass the latitude and longitude instead of city name or attraction names. So that's why there are two inputs, but it will take only one of those. Good. Then date, which is a string. Then unit, it is a string. It could be metric or imperial. That's why our model won't use anything new. It will use any one of these. Then description of those unit. Then unit coordinates, which is a Boolean flag to use coordinates instead of location name. So all the three information are required. This so far we have defined three different JSON things. Now we are going to create an assistant. But before that, let's save the JSON details in some available functions and then tools. So I have three different functions, available functions. So let's use the same name, get coordinates and create city map, then get weather. Get coordinates. We use the function name, get coordinates, not the JSON. Create city map, then get weather. Because our model, like function calling in models, it will just tell you, you have to call create city map with some input. So it passes the details as a string, create city map. So when it says create city map, we should know we have to call this function. That's why I'm putting everything in a dictionary. So let's run this. So now we have got some tools. As I said before, assistants can have some multiple tools. So let's see the right hand side here. Okay. It's populating something. You can ignore. Okay. So here you can see the tools or code interpreter, retrieval, function calling. For this project, we will be using code interpreter and function calling. I will let you know why we have to use code interpreter very soon, but let's focus more on function calling now. So in the tools, let's pass all the functions we have defined. Get coordinates JSON, then create citymap JSON, then get weather JSON. Then we will add code interpreter type. So these are the tools. Okay. So now let's do few other things. Let's focus more on chat completion for now. Then we will compare that with assistants, see how that looks like. So chat completion API. So let's do that. Response. So let's ask chat completion API to find today's date. So today's date is January 18th. So let's say if our model going to find this response equal to client dot chat dot completions dot create. We can use model 841106 preview. Then messages. So in messages, we can create a list. In that list, we have a role, which is user, then content. In content, we have what's today's date. Maybe ask it to return as year, month, and date. Maybe let's ask it to return in JSON. So recently, that completions they introduced something like JSON mode. Let's say you want the response format in JSON. We have to do two things. One is in the message, we have to say we need a JSON. Then also there is a one more parameter called response underscore format. In response underscore format, we set type as JSON object. Response underscore format equal to type JSON object. Okay. So this looks good. Maybe let's add few other things as well, like temperature 0.1, seed 1. Okay, I should comma here. Okay, I added a 2 equals. It should be just 1. Okay, we got a response. Let's get the response details. Current date is a loads response dot choices of 0, then message dot content. Okay, it says the current date is 2023 April 1st, which is completely wrong since ChatGPT, like OpenAI models, they don't have access to real time information, and also they have some knowledge cutoff, so they don't have any tools to know today's current date. What we are going to do is we will use Assistants API to find current date, and we will also use Assistants API to write few more code to convert all our text into some documents like travel guide. So for that we use code interpreter. So now let's create assistants, then we will do a few other things. Maybe let me create assistants here. So as we know, assistants API, it has few details like instructions, model names, then tools. For now, we will focus on this because we are not using any file information. We just focus on instructions, models, tools, and we name some like travel assistant, something like that. So let's do that. So before that, let's create some instructions. So instructions, what I'm saying is you are a personal travel assistant. You use available functions to help your user plan their trip. Create inputs to the functions carefully. If you could not find the available functions, you can use your own knowledge to help your user. Sometimes you have to use parallel functions to get the desired output. Find the exact date they are planning to visit and use that information for getting current weather. To do plotting, we need coordinates, current weather, and tourist attractions. So, for plotting maps, first get coordinates of each tourist attractions that you suggest, then current weather, and then do the plotting of map. Then we are color coding the markers based on weather condition. If it's rainy, we use red color, otherwise blue. This is helpful for the user to plan their trip accordingly. So this is our instructions. Now let's create an assistant. So OpenAI recently introduced this assistance, so that's why it's currently in beta. If you are watching this video after a few months, like July maybe, you don't have to use beta. You can directly use client.assistance. For now, let me use client.beta.assistance. You can also follow this channel. In future, I'll be replacing all these functions, and I'll be also doing a lot of side projects and share the code and walkthroughs. So name equal to travel assistant, then instructions, tools, because we defined the tools here. We are using functions and we are using code interpreter. Then we have to use models. So I'm using GPT-4 1106 preview. If you are watching this video in future, this will also change. You can also follow this channel to see the updated code. Otherwise, you can go through the OpenAI platform and then figure out the model details. So now I created an assistant. Maybe let's display the assistant. So you can see assistant with some ID. Then it created at some timestamp. Then descriptions, we didn't describe anything. Then we didn't upload any file. We also have instructions, which is a long instruction. Then if you see the tool section, we have some tool function. We have three different functions with the description and other details. A lot of function information. Then finally, you will see code interpreter. Last tool call is code interpreter. These are the available tools that we are planning to use. Okay. So now let's focus more on creating threads. So far, we have created an assistant, but now we are going to create some thread. I will talk about what thread is and what are the things we can do with threads. Then we will create some threads and we will add some messages. So let's do that. So before writing any code, let me walk through what threads are. Let's say in ChatGPT, you have a conversation window, and you ask some question and ChatGPT replies something. Then you ask one more question, ChatGPT will reply something. Sometimes it replies many things. Okay. So this conversation window is same as a thread. So this is thread. So let's say you are building some application. It's a good practice to create one thread per user as soon as they start to use your product. Then you pass user specific context and file information to the conversation by creating messages. There is no size limit in threads. It can have any number of messages. OpenAI models will automatically use truncation and it will use only the relevant information for the model. So there is no size limit. You can also have 1 million images, but ChatGPT or OpenAI models that just uses truncation to find recent information and it passes to the model. No size limit. We don't have to worry about context window. So that's one thing. Context window, we don't have to worry. But the issue is we don't have any control over the cost. You pay for the entire message history with all the tokens in it. So that's the downside. And now it's a good time to show you the platform. On platforms like OpenAI platform, you can see all the threads and assistants information. So assistants and thread information are on the platform. Let me show you that. So this is platform.openai.com assistants. Let's say you have created some assistants, like we created one assistant recently. Let's refresh this page. You can see this is the assistance we created just now. Then threads. So you will see some of the past threads that I have created previously. Take some time to load. Okay. So these are the threads I have created previously. You can also control who has access to these threads. If you go to settings, you can see threads. We can choose hidden if your organization is sharing the same with same tokens and other details with a lot of other people. You can visible to everyone. You can choose accordingly. By default, this is hidden. You can enable visible to organization owners if you are playing with it. So now let's create some thread. To create a thread, it's very easy. Thread equal to client dot beta dot threads dot create. Okay. So we have created thread. Let's see how the thread looks like. Let's type. So this is thread. It has ID and it's created at some timestamp, and metadata, it's empty, and object, this is thread. So thread is like an independent one. We don't have any information on assistant. We will connect thread and assistants using runs. So we will see that in soon. Now what we are going to do is we are going to add some messages. We, before adding messages, let's create some personalization. Adding personalization. So my preferences are temples, gardens, museums. And the city I'm planning to visit is Kyoto. Now let's create a message. To create a message, we can use client.beta.threads messages. Create. Then we can pass thread ID. ID equal to thread ID. Delete the rest. Now role equal to user. Then content. Okay. So in the content, what I'm asking is, I'm planning to visit Kyoto, like we use F string today. I said today. Our functions will automatically use today's date and would appreciate detailed information about the city. Please provide an overview of the location, 20 to 30 words each, and list the top 10 tourist attractions. Additionally, could you include the current date and the weather forecast for each attractions? Utilize the code interpreter to retrieve current date in the city location. So kindly organize the attractions in a sequence that facilitates an efficient visiting route. Attraction focus preferences. We added our preferences on these things. So let's run this. Since I created a message, I'm going to talk a little bit about the messages. So messages can be mostly text. Optionally, it can be also files. We can also include files in messages. Then once we define the messages are added to a thread because we are passing a thread ID. So add messages to a thread. Then we can also list all the messages in some thread. The messages are added in reverse chronological order, which means most recent will happen in the first with its zeroth index. A quick side note, in chat completions, we can add images using GPT for version model, but currently on assistants in messages, we cannot add any images, but we can add images as a retrieval in assistants. It's not like a directly in the message. It's going to be like a retrieval. Okay. So far, we have created messages and we created a threads, we created assistants. So now we are going to connect everything because so far our thread which has messages, doesn't know anything about our assistants. We just created everything independent. We are going to connect using runs. So let's talk about runs. Then we will write some code and see how that goes. So runs. So assistant reads the thread and decide whether to use any tools or just models. Then it append messages to the thread with role as assistant. So as you see here, we also have user message and we also have assistant's message. The assistants will automatically add messages to a thread. The most recent message is at 0th index. So assistant will automatically decide what previous messages to include as a context to the model. So mostly assistants will include most of the messages to fill their tokens, so which is sad. But OpenAI will soon add a few improvements to pass some relevant information, not just all the information with the models. And we can override assistance instructions in runs. Let's say in previously, let's say we have created an instructions this. Let's say you wanted to change this instruction completely. Instead of updating the assistant, we can pass some instructions in the runs, and this new instruction, will override the previous instructions. And another important aspect of runs are asynchronous, which is very important. So we can just create a run, it will run in the background. We can move to the next ones. So I will show you how to create a runs first. Then we will learn more about what are some status of different runs and what's happening in the background. We will learn that. Okay. So now we are going to define a run. Run equal to client dot beta dot threads dot runs create. Now we are going to connect thread ID and assistant ID. Thread ID equal to thread dot ID. Then assistant ID equal to assistant dot ID. Okay. So we created a run. Let's run this. Forgot to add comma. So this should be assistant.id. Just assistant. So we created a run. So currently this run, our message, this is happening. Everything is happening in the background. We can see the status. Let's retrieve the run first and click the status. Client.beta dot runs dot retrieve. You can pass the thread ID and run ID. Thread ID equal to thread.id, run ID equal to run.id. Now we can check the status. Currently, this is in progress. So what we can do is we can write a while loop and see a different status information and see how that looks like. But before that, let's run the code first. Then I will walk through the different run steps. So there are a few run steps that's happening in the background. The first thing is it goes to queued, then in progress, then completed. Sometimes it will also say requires action, which means we have to call some functions ourselves. So let's run some code. So you can see it says requires action. Now let's retrieve the messages and see what's happening there. Messages equal to client.beta.threads.messages.list. If we do that, it will list messages. Maybe let me display the messages in a nice format. You can see it has data, and data is a list. So we have to take the 0th index, and it has content, which is here. Content is also a list. We have to take the 0th index to find the recent message. Then it has text and it has value. Okay. I think we created two variables, city and city name. Maybe let's change, or maybe let's use London and see how that goes. So it should be city name. Okay. Run this. So in London, it says these are the suggestions that is suitable for my preference. And also it says we have to call request action, which means it's asking us to create, call some functions. Let's see what it asks us to do. So run has required action dot submit tools. Submit tool outputs dot tool calls. Let's run this. So what it does is it's asking us to call these functions. The first function is you can see some ID, then you can see some arguments, place name, city name, and the function is get coordinates. So we are going to find coordinates for all this information like place name and city. With this combination, we will find the coordinates. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is if run.status equal to request action outputs. So we are going to find tool outputs. Then we pass the tool outputs to the model assistant. So initially the tool outputs is empty. We are going to use a for loop for call in run.required action dot submit tool outputs dot tool calls. Then we can retrieve the function name. The function name is it's in the call. You can see a function and you can see a name. So it should be call dot function dot name because this list has 10 items. We are naming each item as a call. So call dot function dot name. So that's how we get the function name. Then let's get the function real function because the function name is a string. We have to find the real function. We have already defined a dictionary that has those details. For example, get coordinates. This is a function. So we pass get coordinates and we get the real function as an output. So let's do that. Function equal to available functions, function name. Then arguments. So the arguments are here. Function dot arguments. You can see this is a string. But what we can do is we can convert this to a dictionary and then we can pass this to the model and we will get some output. So arguments equal to json dot loads call dot function dot arguments. Now output equal to function, pass the arguments, then we get the output. Then we pass the output to tool outputs. Tool outputs dot append. So what we have is tool call ID. So we have to name it like tool call ID with the current call ID. Then we pass the output. Output. In output, we get some output, but we have to pass as a string. It's a terms output. So this looks good. Then once this is done, we pass everything to the model. So run equal to client dot beta dot threads dot runs submit thread id underscore id to run dot id. Then tool outputs equal to tool outputs. What we have done is our model asks us to call these local functions ourselves. Then we call the functions ourselves. Then we create a list of tool outputs. Then we pass the tool outputs to the model saying we have done these functions and these are the outputs. Run this. Okay. So currently a run is happening. Maybe we can see what's happening there. This code. While run.status is queued or in progress, we retrieve the run and we check the status. I think now it's a good time to talk more about run status. Run status. So, as we know, runs are asynchronous. We create a run first, then we retrieve a run. So, after retrieving a run, we will see some status. So, initially, it goes to queued, completed, in progress, requests, action. These are important status. There are some other status are like expired, cancelled, failed. Failed. Okay. Now it says it's cancelled. Let's figure it out why this is cancelled. Let's display the messages first. Let me run the recent message and see if there is any information on why this is cancelled. So currently this says, maybe let's go through this one. Okay. So there is no information on why this is cancelled. Maybe let's rerun the same one more time and see how that looks like. Let's create thread, adding messages. Let's put this. Okay, currently it says it's in progress. It's calling the functions. Okay, currently it says request action. Let's see what those actions are. I can type run.requiredaction.submit tool outputs.tool calls. Let's run this. It says for these coordinates on this date, find the current weather. So we have defined a function called getWeather, and it passes all the arguments. It's asking us to call these functions with this argument and pass the output to me, and I will figure it out what to do next. So that's what it says. Now let's copy the same code as previously. And let's rerun one more time. Usually, I write a loop, like a single function that does all these things in the loop. But to teach you, I have put this in a way to show intermediate steps clear. Okay, it's asking us to do a request action. Let's see what it asks us to do. Run.requiredaction.submit tools.tool outputs. Let's run this. It's asking us to do a few things like city name, London, and it has given some attractions. Then rainy. Currently, none of the places are rainy, so it's always no. Create city map. So it's asking us to create a map. So let's copy the same. Let's paste this. Run this. Okay. So our functions that created a map. These are the tourist attractions that it asked me to do on tomorrow on this order. You can see, me zoom it. You can see the name and coordinates. Currently, is the weather is really good tomorrow. The forecast says it's good weather, so that's why there is no red dot. It looks good to me, and you will see the run dot status is completed. So we have completed a single function. Maybe I will show you what are the messages it added. To find that, in messages we have list messages equal to client.beta.threads.messages.list. We can just pass the thread ID. You will get all the messages. So it looks like this. There is a way to see this easily, like messages.model dump. Okay, so you can see these are the messages it added. So first, this is our message. I'm planning to visit London today and would appreciate detailed information about the city. Then it added, as our assistant added a message saying the current date is this one, and it talked about London, and it also suggested a few places. Then it asked us to plotted all the information. So far, what we have done is we get the city name and our preferences, our model assistant will automatically find some attractions that's suitable for us, and it find the current weather, and it also give us some input to plot the map. Maybe now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more function, like one more assistant. But before that, let's display the results a little bit neater. Let's delete this. Let's paste this. So this is the result, our recent result that we are getting. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one more message asking for a Word document with all the details like a travel guide. So message 2 asking for a Word document with all the details. For document, we also wanted to do a map, see what city is Kyoto. City name is London. So we have to use city map. What we are going to do is file city name dot png. So we are going to create a map, like saving the map. City. I think our function already saved it. Let's check. Okay, we have a image london.png. Our function automatically saved this. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create a file object and upload this file object in our assistant. So let's do that. So city file, files create. So file equal to open city, then purpose. This is assistant. We have to say this is assistants. Okay. So in order to pass a file, the assistant, we have to create a file object, not just file name, which is very important. So now what we are going to do is we are going to create a new assistant, create a document creator assistant. And we use the same thread and we get some data. So our new assistant, let's type it. Assistant document doc equal to client dot beta dot assistants create. So we can name it name equal to travel guide Word document creator assistant. Then we can add some instructions. So you are a helpful assistant that creates Word document with useful information about the city, explaining each attractions, arranging in each easy order to travel, include weather details, map, PNG file. Map is a PNG file. Then tools, we are saying you can use code interpreter. Then file IDs. Okay, what I have done wrong. I forgot to add a comma. City file is not defined. Okay, let's run this. It's creating a file and let's, okay, it has some ID and the file name when it's created and what's its purpose. Now let's create this assistant document. Okay, it misses model. Model equal to GPT-4 1106 review. So we have created an assistant. Now we are going to create a new message saying, maybe let's add the message. Our new message is client.beta.threads.messages.create. We use the same thread ID that we used previously. And our content is create a Word document with the PNG file, the file ID, and include all the helpful details. Add information about each attractions, 20 to 30 words each. And some file IDs. Let's run this. This is what we are going to do now. Multiple assistants on a single thread. Let's copy. So multiple assistants on a single thread. We use the same thread, but we are using different assistants. So now what I'm going to do is we created a message. Then we have to use run and we pass the assistant information. So run equal to client.beta.threads runs.create. We pass the same thread ID as previous one, but we are using the new assistant that we created just now. So currently, as we know, runs are asynchronous. A job is submitted. We can retrieve and see what's happening in the runs. So run equal to client.beta.threads.runs, retrieve using the ID and run ID. Since document creation takes some time, we can use time.sleep 60 seconds and see how that goes. So currently it's running. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about code interpreter and knowledge retrieval. So in code interpreter, which is a tool, it runs Python code. So it runs until the code succeeds. So model will choose when to invoke code interpreter. We can explicitly ask the model to use code interpreter. Sometimes we also do this. And currently it costs $0.0 per session. So each session is 1 hour. So let's say we are running many code in 1 hour, we pay like $0.03. And knowledge retrieval. So it augments with additional knowledge. So previously, without assistance, in chat completions, let's say you have your company document, which is 300 pages document, you cannot pass all the 300 pages of information to the model and get some answer. What you do is you do something like chunking, which means divide the document into smaller chunks. Then you index and store its embeddings and store embeddings. Then you write code for vector search. But currently, with Assistants API, all these things are taken care of this assistance. We don't have to do all these things. We just pass the file. The model assistant will do all these things for you. So when you ask some questions, what assistant does is it passes all the content if the document is short. Otherwise, it performs vector search for longer documents. And we can also pass documents in assistant level and message level. There are two levels we can pass. So in future, I'll be doing some projects that does in different scenarios. You can also subscribe this channel to more about the new projects as we go. So now, as we can see, the run is done. Let's retrieve and see what's happening there. To retrieve, we have to use client.beta.threads.messages.list. This one. So let's display messages dot model dump. Okay, you can see a big string. You can see it created a file. So this is the file it created, and it has it has file path and it has file ID. Maybe let's retrieve the file ID. Let's do that. To retrieve the file ID, we can go through the messages. We have to go through the data, which is first data, which has many content. We have to select the first content, then dot text, then dot annotations. Annotations is a list. We have to select the first data. You can see it here. Data, which is a list. Then content, which is a list. Content has annotations. Annotations is a list. It has file path and file ID. So let's get the file ID. So now I'm going to write a small code. Write file to temporary directory. We can use some file name, some file ID, and display. So now I download the document and I saved on my local drive, london.documents. Maybe let me open the document and show you how that looks like. So you can see document. So London City Guide, it has explained about it, and you can see the map. Then it talks about each place. Currently, this is simple. We can also ask it to write more about it, include weather information, those kind of details. You can also do that. Now, So far, what we have done is we learned about how to do this project from top to bottom, and we learned different technologies like chat completions, what is assistance API, what are tools, how to define tools, how to define multiple tools, then what is threads, and what are messages, how can I the thread and messages using runs, and parallel function calling, multiple assistants on a single thread. We did a project end to end. And the important thing is, once you have done a project, it's important to delete the assistants. If you are just using a hobby project, make sure you delete the assistant. Otherwise, it will incur some charge. Also, you can go through the assistant. You can see these two assistants we have created today. And if you go through the threads, you will see all the files and other things that happened. You can see all the information here as well. So now I'm going to delete my assistants, like first display and then delete. So there are two assistants. So it's deleted. And I have also shared all the code in my blog arunprakash.ai. You can also see that on YouTube. The messages you can see. I have explained everything thoroughly here. You can also read these and copy paste the code and build your own projects. So in the upcoming days, I'll also walk through a lot of projects like this end to end. You can also let me know if you want to do something. Thanks.